Dear Ioannis, it's a pleasure to have you here today and to have an opportunity to discuss some very actual questions about sustainability and responsibility in business. I am co-founder and CEO at SmartHead and focus for corporate sustainability. Our company's mission is to make sustainability in business as a new standard globally. That's why we offer for companies an effective online solution, which is company sustainability profile on SmartHead platform, which serve them for effective data management and transparent communication of sustainable activities towards their stakeholders. That is why.
Thank you very much for having me today. It's really a pleasure to be speaking with you. Thank you.
So, because yes, we have the same mindset, and I think that together we create the synergy. That is why I'm so honored to have this interview with you. And let me introduce you to our SmartHead Talks audience. Even if, especially in your case, it's not easy to be concise because there is so many interesting things to mention. So the first one, you regularly publish in top academic journals, including some of the most prestigious, such as the Strategic Management Journal, Management Science, or Journal of International Business Studies. You have been recognized by various rankings as one of the top social media influencers around the world for the topic of responsible business and sustainability. You are also deeply engaged with practice, for example, as a member of the ESG advisory board of the DWS Group, which is one of the world's leading asset managers with about 900 billion of assets under management. You are also a member of advisory board of Ethical Corporation and member of World Economic Forum Expert Network. Regularly, you are invited as a keynote speaker. Among others, I can mention, for example, BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, Factor Symposium, or UBS Investment Conference. You are also a frequent contributor in the managerial press, including Financial Times, Bloomberg, The Guardian, BBC, CNBC, or Forbes. You graduated from Yale University and hold PhD from Harvard University. Ioannis, this is quite impressive.
Thank you very much, Avery. I'm really and truly humbled by your introduction. Thank you.
But it's really, everything is true, and it's your background and it's your story. So I'm really glad to share to our audience that you really do so much in topic corporate sustainability, and you try to help companies to transition their business to more sustainable one. So it's amazing work. So now let's get to your research at the London Business School, where you focus on sustainability and corporate social responsibility. All this your research evolves mainly around two themes. The first one is to understand how investment community perceive and evaluates integration of sustainability into strategy of companies. And the second is to understand factors that affect decision of companies to adopt environmentally and socially responsible strategies. In this interview, I would like to talk more with you about the second theme, which is factors that affect adoption of sustainability by companies. So let me start with the first question. Ioannis, what are your latest findings regarding to factors that influence companies the most when it comes to implementation of sustainability into core strategy, into their DNA?
Thank you, Very. That is a very interesting, very timely, and I would say a very complex question, because I think the primary factor here is that companies are slowly but steadily realizing that we're moving into a different world. We're moving into a fundamentally different competitive landscape. Why? Because the whole host of environmental issues that we're facing are deteriorating. Think about, of course, climate change, but also all the other problems like the loss of biodiversity, the problem with plastics, the deforestation, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, we're also facing a whole host of social issues like health and security issues, as COVID has revealed to us, but also perhaps going forward, issues of mental health, employee well-being, gender pay equality, gender issues, human rights issues, and so on. So we're going into a world where, unfortunately, all these challenges are deteriorating. So that's point number one. Point number two is that, well, businesses do not exist in a social vacuum. They don't exist only in what we have in the past defined as the economic world. They exist in this world that is currently suffering by all of these problems. So we see those problems in a very material way, in other words, in a very important way, affecting companies' business models. For instance, we see an increasing amount of regulation, especially as it relates to climate change and to plastics and so on. So first point of contact is the fact that companies are seeing the writing on the wall. There is more regulation and more government pressure that is going that they're going to be facing in order to address these issues. And of course, there's the whole us, society, citizens, putting pressure through multiple pathways. For instance, as consumers, we increasingly demand more environmental, social, and ethical standards in terms of the products and services that we're consuming. Second of all, it's as employees, we increasingly demand that not only the companies we work for do no harm, but as a matter of fact, we demand that they have a positive impact on the world. And of course, we as investors, we have pension funds, we have savings accounts, we care about how these organizations are actually using our own resources, because in the past, let's be honest, they've used some of these resources in order to make the world a worse place for future generations rather than just delivering to the next generations a world that's at least as good and perhaps better. We have been doing exactly the opposite, right? Now, all of these pressures have been exaggerated by other kind of mega trends. For instance, the generational shift, millennials. Millennials are even more demanding when it comes to the products and services they're consuming. They're even more demanding as employees. They're even more demanding as investors because they have many more years of, let's say, pension savings ahead of them, and they care about how those savings are being used. We also see the intergenerational transfer of wealth from the baby boomers to millennials, and we're talking about, by some estimates, about $10 trillion around the world. That's more investor pressure. Which brings me to another point, of course, is that in addition to governments and society, we also have, in particular, the capital markets putting pressure on organizations, increasingly so. Why? Well, because at the very least, they realize that the challenges that we talked about earlier have material financial impacts. In other words, they fundamentally affect any company's ability to generate value, whether we talk about financial value or social value. So the investment community, at least to some extent, is looking at these issues as risks that need to be managed. And we already see signs, of course, that some more forward-looking investors do not only see the risks, but in fact, they see the opportunities here. Because in order to address the world's challenges, we need a fundamental rethink of the system. We need a fundamental rethink of the role of the corporation in society as a productive unit of the economy, right? So if you put all of those pressures together, right, and we didn't even mention the fact that technology is accelerating some of these trends. For instance, things about social media. Yes, there's the dark side of social media that is extensively discussed, but also social media can and does enable activism. It can diffuse and disseminate information much more quickly. It creates not only awareness, but it creates collective awareness. I know that you know that company A is doing something bad. And that makes it more likely that collectively we might take action, we might boycott, we might picket outside a company's headquarters, we might decide to push our pension fund to divest from that company, right? So if you see these demographic changes, these technological changes already accelerate these underlying problems. And the last but not least is, of course, the science behind it all. Unfortunately, and very sadly and tragically, with every new scientific report that comes out recently, we only learn how much worse we're doing compared to what we thought we were doing. I've yet to see a scientific report that says actually we're doing better. Quite the reverse. It's all the news that comes out is about the worsening condition. Now, if you're a CEO, if you're an executive team, if you're just any company, right? How could you miss all of these challenges? How could you not engage? How could you not try to engage? So I think all of those, the reasons are multiple levels. You see there is international, national, and even in industry level factors that push companies to at least start considering how and why can I survive? And in fact, how and why can I thrive in this new landscape?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I had many ideas and thoughts because as a one of millennial, I can only totally agree. It's really changing the mindset and how young generation thinks about the future, how they want to be part of positive change of impact, and they want to choose in employers, and they want to choose company where they feel that it's the same with their minds and with their values, that the corporate culture is set up the same way how they want to be part of it. So that's why I only totally agree. And for example, from the government side, there is also SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations, and it also push forward this topic and involve more private sector to be active and to transform their businesses from the traditional one, which is only profit oriented, to more sustainable one, which also consider the impact on society and environment. So totally agree. And I think that it's necessary also for be success in future on the market, because when company will not change, will have negative impact on their also financial results. So I think that people and stakeholders want to know about the companies, how they improve the life and the society, and how they care about environment where they operate. So maybe I would like to ask you the second question, which is also about the financial, maybe financial pressure. Because I think that we both agree that factors that companies are most interested in are those which positively affect in bottom line. Can you share with us some cases where implementation of sustainability into core strategy affects companies' bottom line?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me start by highlighting the framework that you mentioned, which is the UN Sustainable Development Goals, because I think that's a fantastic framework that, well, basically it's the first time that as a world we came together, and it says a lot that the first time we came together was to define all of our problems, but that's precisely what the Sustainable Development Goals are. And don't get me wrong, they have a very strong motivational, inspirational, symbolic value to them, right? We have envisioned, if you like, how a better world would look like, in this case, by 2030. But I think when I often say this to my students as well, what we also need to understand is that the Sustainable Development Goals is arguably one of the largest and most difficult industrial challenges that we have ever undertaken, because we are talking about greening our infrastructure, changing our energy system, our transportation system, alleviating poverty, stopping the acidification of oceans, cleaning up the water, and so on and so forth. In other words, it's a huge industrial challenge, and therefore, in my view at least, it creates huge industrial opportunities for companies that are willing to engage with these problems. And that takes me to your question about profitability of companies. Well, we already see this, right? If you are on board with my argument that the competitive landscape is dramatically changing, then now we're going into a period of disruption. I often say that sustainability is in fact the mother of all disruptions. Why? Because it comes from these domains, in other words, the environmental and social domains, where traditionally companies, right, have limited experience, knowledge in terms of how to handle these issues. So some of my work has actually looked at this idea of how well do companies perform when they genuinely, when they truly, not just box ticking, not just greenwashing, when they actually integrate environmental and social issues into their way they do business. And in my view, at least, the evidence is overwhelming that these are better performing companies. Whether you talk about operational performance, market performance, whether you talk about short term or long term, these companies perform better because you know what? It's simple. It's a simple. It's a straightforward adaptation story. These are organizations that are a better fit for these very fast changing positions. But I should also argue here, note here, by the way, that what happens in every disruption, well, just look at the corporate graveyard. Corporate graveyard is packed with once iconic brands like Sears, Polaroid, Kodak, Blockbuster, companies that failed to adapt to arguably smaller disruptions. So we should not forget that a big component, of course, of transitioning to a sustainable future is the adaptation of current companies, incumbent companies. But another big component is going to be new entrants that come in and really shake out traditional industries. And we have seen this. Think about Tesla in the automobile industry. Think about companies like Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat that coming into traditional industries like meat production. Think about even in the energy sector. Another big argument there is whether our existing utilities and even perhaps the oil majors will ever be able to transition into renewable energy. Right? It's very different to run a centralized system of production and distribution of electricity versus a totally decentralized system that depends on, for instance, solar panels. Right? So all of those questions and all of those challenges are part of this disruption, but the evidence today does indicate that companies that truly engage with these issues, that look at themselves as open systems, not only as a organization that kind of worships the supreme being, which is the shareholder, but rather look at the organization as a team of stakeholders, all of whom contribute to the company, right? Yes, the shareholders provide the financial capital, but then there's human capital. There's, of course, natural capital, where traditionally we haven't been able to price. A lot of clean air is free. Water is in some cases free. So that's why we have used and abused it in so many areas, right? So these externalities, in other words, especially the negative ones, haven't been priced into the system. But at the high level, we of course know that that outperformance is there.
And I would like maybe to talk about this current COVID situation, because it's not easy way also for companies maybe to adapt the changing environment. But I think that it's so naturally that they adapt so fast because they have to. They have to, and it's necessary also for them to be successful. So currently global economy faces COVID crisis. And is there any lesson that business should learn out of it when we compare it to the potential climate crisis, which is ahead?
Absolutely. So let me link back to the question you asked me about the profitability, because the profitability and the outperformance generates the next question, which is how does this happen? Why is it the case that if you integrate environmental and social issues, you become a better company? And I think we have a lot of research now that shows multiple mechanisms. And allow me to show you some share some examples, and we'll see how that links to the COVID crisis as well, right? So we know that companies, let's call them high sustainability companies, right, have preferential access to human capital. We just discussed this, right? The best and the brightest and the young generations want to work for companies that are actually committed to these issues. That's precisely why the oil and gas industry, for instance, or mining, have trouble recruiting people. So preferential access to human capital. There is academic evidence that shows that companies that commit to sustainability and build the structures for sustainability actually deliver more and higher quality innovation. Why? Because you have a long-term horizon, more ambitious objectives, and you allow your employees the psychological safety to experiment and fail in the process, much more so than companies that don't have that commitment to sustainability. We also know that high sustainability companies enjoy a more robust license to operate. We have seen this in the mining industry, for instance, when it used to be the case that when mining companies were abandoning a mine that was no longer productive, right, they literally left a hole in the ground and a devastated local economy. But now the most forward-looking of mining companies actually have what we would call an exit plan. You're not going to leave. Governments require that, right? So that if I'm going to give you mining rights, I want to know what happens when that mine dries out. So the social license to operate is yet another mechanism. And of course, we have slowly but steadily the rise of ethical consumerism, as we said before. When you produce products that are both better and greener and more responsible, then you're tapping into a very large and expanding market of consumers. The other area that I have done a lot of research in is this idea of capital markets. We have a lot of evidence that companies with high sustainability credentials gain better access to finance. And it makes a lot of sense, right? And that's why you've seen the proliferation of so many new financial instruments, from green bonds, sustainable development goals, and goals, bonds, and so on, social bonds, green loans, green mortgages in some cases, and so on. So the financial system is not only waking up to the risks, but it wakes up to the opportunities, right? And rewards these companies. In some other of my work, I've actually shown that the analyst perceptions of high sustainability companies are becoming increasingly more optimistic, in other words, more positive. So that and that all adds up to an enhanced brand and reputation and customer and stakeholder loyalty. Companies that engage with these issues early don't even need to worry about adverse regulatory impacts. Imagine if you're an automobile company, right, that focuses on electric vehicles. Well, any laws and regulations that pertain to the efficiency of petrol vehicles, or the prohibitions that we see around the world, like cities saying, I'm not going to allow petrol cars anymore on my streets, they don't affect you. You're already ahead of competition because you're already working on electric cars. So all those reasons, I think, are how we go from a commitment to outperformance. Now, let's come to COVID. I think the COVID-19 has exposed a lot of these inefficiencies that low sustainability companies have. In other words, I like to use this phrase, which is it's in the mud that the diamonds shine, right? So what we've seen is that I think companies with high sustainability credentials create these intangible assets, these more deeper and fundamental relationships with their stakeholders. And those relationships become particularly valuable when you go into a crisis, not only in good times, right? Now, what have we learned about COVID-19 or through COVID-19? Well, we have learned about, well, perhaps even rediscovered the S in the ESG, in other words, the social aspect, and things like employee safety, work-life balance, employee mental health, risk in supply chains, and interdependency across different actors in the supply chain, and so on, have all come to the forefront. And the world, unlike previous crises, the world is watching. That's why we have companies like Just Capital, for instance, that actually monitor and report on how companies are responding to the crisis, especially when it comes to employees, but also more broadly, right? And we have seen bright examples of companies, switching to producing PPE. We have companies like Amazon that have actually provided funds to the small players in their supply chains to help them survive, or even funds in their local kind of vicinity, right, to survive and so on. But I do think there are a couple of, if you allow me to share them, I think there are a couple of bigger lessons here that we learned from COVID-19, especially to link back to your question about climate change. So I think there are positives and then there are negatives as well. Let me start with the negatives first. There was a lot of talk about all this stimulus money going into building back better. But I think because of the political system in many countries, I don't think we have quite hit that target. I think a lot of the stimulus money is going still into fossil fuel dominated industries and traditional vested interest. I think to some extent, of course, as they should, countries or governments are paying attention to the pandemic. So I have seen, and I do discern evidence of more short-term thinking. How do we get out of this crisis? As opposed to a bit of more long-term thinking in terms of how do we invest today so that perhaps we're better prepared for the next crisis. So we're going more into there was at least a concern that we would go more into survival mode as opposed to the green mode. Likely, some of those concerns did not pan out. That's why you see, for instance, the inflow into sustainable funds has continued and increased through the year. And if anything, they've been performing much better than other aspects of than other funds. Now, it also, and this is the one that really concerns me, is that, look, the COVID crisis, despite and the fact that we all acknowledge that it had some tragic consequences in terms of loss of human life and of course the halting of economic activity. But it's a relatively simple crisis, and what I mean by that, there is a solution to it, which is the vaccine. Right? It's an obvious solution. There's a one scientifically proven solution to it. It is, if we talk about climate change, if we talk about the loss of biodiversity, these are massively more complex problems. There is no vaccine to deal with climate change. We need much more profound systems change in order to deal with climate change. Now, around the world, I mean, it is a subjective assessment, but I do think that our dealing of the COVID crisis has been so-so. Perhaps some governments more successful than others. We do have a vaccine, and even the vaccine rollout is very slow. So I would give us, I'm still debating, is it passing or a failing mark on how we dealt with the COVID crisis. But that creates a lot of concern about, are we capable of dealing with even bigger crises? Now, you can turn that on its head. Let's go now to the positives. Perhaps these crises have told us that we are unprepared for major crises, and maybe, just maybe, we will invest more in that direction, in resources, in capabilities, in knowledge. Now, the other thing about the crisis is that finally, right, it has elevated the role of science and the role of data and the role of evidence-based decision-making. That's why in most countries around the world, you have an epidemiologist and a health expert every night in the news explaining to you what is happening. And that's how, hopefully, at least to some extent, are taking decisions about how to deal with the crisis. So I'm hoping that we're going to finally stop all this nonsense that's saying, oh, climate scientists are alarmists and they're exaggerating and so on, and actually listen carefully and diligently to what they say, and in terms of how we should stop our carbon emissions, limit our carbon emissions, set science-based targets, and deal with climate change. The other important thing is that COVID has highlighted the role of government, especially in the Western world. Government has been under siege, and especially under siege from the political right and from corporations. We have undermined government. We wanted as small government as possible. We wanted government to get out of our way of the way of the market, because the market would work. That experiment failed. That's exactly where we are in a climate existential crisis today. And it also showed that the role of government, in the sense that, you know what, when we want to implement the scale up solutions, you know what, it's only the government that can tell you stay at home or wear a mask, because that's what the common good requires. And of course, we've seen, you know, so many organizations that even some of them have traditionally worked against the government when all this crisis hit, to go knocking on government's door to bail them out. Right. So I'm therefore a bit more optimistic about kind of revising or or thinking about the role of government. And I'm, you know, quite optimistic about now with that the President Biden and Vice President Harris is taking over the US, and even hours after they took over, they rejoined the climate agreement, the Paris Agreement. So now we see those sort of optimistic signs of leadership that we need in order to bring the world together to deal with these issues. And if you allow me, the final point I would mention on the positives is that at least some people and some social actors are actually rethinking our social contract after the crisis, understanding who and how they are important in the economy, understanding the role of a healthcare system, understanding the role of doctors and nurses, understanding the role of people that work in retail, the people that are able, that enable us to have food at our table, because they risk their lives to work in supermarkets to deliver the food to us, and so on. Same applies to, you know, all public servants, including even the person that, of course, picks up our trash during the crisis, right? So I'm hoping that we have a more fundamental rethink about what is important, who is actually creating real value in the economy, and how. Think about teachers, for instance, right? Think about all key workers. Think about police and the fire brigade and so on. All of these, what we call key workers, we have propelled us to rethink about the social contract, and hopefully to make us appreciate and perhaps reward much more those categories of people. So there are reasons to be optimistic and pessimistic. I like to be optimistic. I think that we're going to learn more than we're going to suffer, but at the end of the day, only time will tell.
Yeah, I like that you open mind and that you show, Ioannis, two sides of one coin, because yes, this COVID crisis show us the positiveness, also the negativeness, but I hope that we will be more wiser, conscious, and that we will be better prepared for what maybe we challenge as a climate crisis. So I hope that we will be so clever and we will do more and we'll be more active in this topic, because I think this is necessary for us and also for the next generations. So, and within a coming decade, what are, according to your opinion, factors that will affect most significantly the way how global economy will look like in 2030?
I think there's a couple of issues here. First of all, we're going to see this trend of integrating environmental and social issues by business organizations continue and accelerate. This trend is here to stay. This tells us, as we said at the beginning, what would the corporation of the future look like? A corporation that goes beyond the being part of the problem, but beginning to be part of the solution to the world's biggest challenges. I think that we're going to see a lot of developments in the area of reporting, ESG and sustainability reporting. I think that we're going to go into a world with radically higher levels of transparency, both by business organizations and by asset managers and investors, in terms of how are we using this big capital allocation system that we have in order to build a better future. I hope and pray that we're going to see an acceleration in investments in order to advance the sustainable development goals. There are positive signs that we're going to see more collaboration across countries in order to achieve those objectives. I do expect to see, and I would like to see, even faster changes when it comes to our energy system, our transportation system, and pretty much all the rethinking traditional industries like the airline industry, like the construction industry, like the cement industry, transportation industry, and so on, that are big, and of course the energy system, that are big polluters that emit a lot of greenhouse gases, and kind of try to rein that in and meet our targets. I do, on the social front, I do expect to see more activism, because the truth of the matter is, although we are moving in the right direction, we are not moving with the right speed and magnitude. We need to do much more, and we need to do much more faster. That's precisely why we see the emergence of Extinction Rebellion. That's why we're seeing the leadership role of Greta Thunberg. And I do expect that to accelerate, at least until that generation comes into the political system. I just hope that we bring about enough change before they do, so they stand a chance, if you like, to prevent catastrophic climate change, and that, not to mention the other social and environmental issues. So it's I think that the decade ahead is exciting in the sense that it's starting with I mean, assuming that we, in 2021 we overcome to some extent, to significant extent, the COVID crisis. I think we're starting with good credentials and a renewed sort of sense of motivation. I hope that COP26 this year is going to accelerate even more that momentum towards doing more.
And Ioannis, you are also responsible for the course Sustainability Leadership and Corporate Responsibility at the London Business School. Many times we are asked to recommend companies, representatives, any kind of education in this field. Can you tell us what is the goal of your course and what is the outcome for the participants? Because as a Smart CEO, I'm really considering attending this course.
Wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the course Very. So this is a fully online course. It lasts 6 weeks. It has what we call synchronous components, in other words, live components, and asynchronous components. And the idea here is that this is a course that is targeting mid to senior level executives that very simply and perhaps very powerfully want to transition their companies into this new economy, right, into this new competitive landscape. What I would call is in an enterprise-wide fashion to future-proof their organizations. So I think the conceptual backbone, if you like, of the course is as follows. First, we discuss what is sustainability, why does it matter now, right? Why should companies care about it? Then we talk about what we discussed together, actually, the evidence about outperformance. Because the idea here, Very, of this course is that I would like to create change agents. I would like to create people that are equipped to move the heart and the mind of their organizations to become more sustainable companies, right? So in order to move the heart and the mind, you also need the data, the science, what the science says about is sustainability profitable, and if it is, then how is it profitable? But you also need the soft skills. So in this course, we do we explore the evidence. I actually also develop critical thinkers. In other words, I want you to know what's the difference between correlation and causation. I want you to be able to articulate the data yourself to make the business case to your audience, to your investors, to your organization. Now, after that, we go into the more complex issues, of course, where all the mechanisms that we discussed earlier about how does sustainability create value, we see these through an online case study. So I put the participants in groups. We do a full stakeholder mapping in order to understand that at the heart of sustainability lie trade-offs, right? There are often conflicting demands and expectations across a company's different stakeholders. How do you deal with that as an executive? How do you take those trade-offs and transform them into forward-looking business opportunities so that you thrive as a business while creating positive social and environmental value? Then we're going, once we understand the business case and the mechanisms, then we're going to questions about organizational design. How does we move this beyond the CEO? What is the role of corporate governance? What is the role of reporting? What is the role of long-term decision making? So in that part of the course, we discuss more about how do I build a sustainable organization? How do I be the house of sustainability, if you like? Now, we also then talk a bit more forward looking. As we mentioned, you also need the soft skills. So we talk about sustainability as a transformational change, as a cultural change for the organization that affects the identity and the trust of the organization. And we finish by what we call an implementation guide that helps executives kind of summarize the course in a series of steps of what they can do at their own business. Now, this is the online platforms that allows us to do many things on this. So I'll give you an example of the different elements of the course. So every week, of course, you're going to have multiple videos by myself. In at least 2 times during the course, I'm going to also show up for a live session with the participants. But the participants also have a weekly live session with learning managers. So we have 2 coaches working on the course that coach and shepherd the participants through the 6 weeks. You're going to have homework to do. So every week you will learn the concept, but your mission would be to apply the concept for your own context. We have what we call checklists to make sure that every week you took away what you're supposed to take away from the course. We have interviews with leading practitioners, including the Mike Barry from M&S. We have the CEO of Share Action. So across the CEO of Eon and the energy industry. So across the board, interviews. And also every week we actually produced a PDF takeaway document for you, so you have the main points summarized and illustrated. So the idea, though, at the core is, as I mentioned before, is to take senior leaders that care about sustainability, or some of them, they have been even assigned the responsibility of sustainability in their organizations, and they just don't know where to start. So this is a foundation to advanced course where we theoretically kind of build the language, build the concepts, the decision-making frameworks. And allow me to finish by saying what this course isn't. This is not a technical course. I'm not here to teach you how to report according to the GRI or SASB, right? I'm not here to go through paragraph 3C of the regulation, blah, about your business. Those are what I consider technical courses.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to tell you stories. I don't, if you want to learn about Unilever or Tesla, go read the Financial Times. Here, we're talking about evidence-based principles that are based on research across many companies, many years, and many industries, in order to be able to equip, if you like, the participants to deal with any situation in the sustainability space. Because stories are good and nice to hear, but it's dangerous to generalize from them, because what worked from Unilever might not work for your own company. So this is a conceptual, and I mean, of course we have examples, but this is a course that's based on that fundamental principle of evidence-based decision making.
Wow, interesting. Thank you so much for sharing this information about your course. I definitely think about it, because, of course, we at SmartHead, for us, corporate sustainability is DNA, and sustainable leadership is something what we also want to spread and help our companies from SmartHead portfolio to be more sustainable. So I think that this could be very valuable course and time, and also we can have more information, knowledge from the topic of corporate sustainability or CSR, also ESG, because you talk about ESG. And maybe I would like to ask one question. What is maybe difference between ESG and corporate sustainability in your opinion? What is your?
I don't see many differences between I think ESG is a acronym that started as a way of describing data sets. In other words, the ESG data sets, right, are ways of measuring a company's sustainability commitment across the environmental, the social, and the governance domains. And I
Yeah.
think the domain, because of its data sort of aspect, is a term that dominated, especially when we talk about the financial aspect, sorry, the financial markets aspect. That's how analysts would talk about it. That's how investors would talk about it. But
Yeah.
fundamentally, I think that ESG, in my view at least, it's a way of measuring or capturing a company's
Mhm.
sustainability commitments. I don't think there's any more radical difference between the two.
Yeah, definitely, because I agree, because our companies ask us about the difference between also corporate sustainability, CSR, SDGs, and ESG, because it's a different term, but I think it's the same. It's the same. Maybe some of them are more focused for the financial sector, investment
Exactly.
sector, some of for more for business partners, from their employees, customers, different stakeholders. So, and
Yeah.
if you can give an advice to any company, Yanis, that wants to adopt sustainability into their core business, into their DNA,
Yeah.
anywhere in the world, what are maybe free activities that companies can start doing right away?
Absolutely. So first of all, understand which ones of these global environmental and social challenges are affecting your industry. In other
Mm-hmm.
words, what is material for your industry? Which of these pressures and how are going to affect your industries and your company's ability to generate both financial as well as social and environmental value? That's point number one. Point number two is then understand how these pressures translate into your industry in terms of your stakeholders. In other words, a complete and comprehensive mapping of all of your stakeholders to really understand what are their demands, what are their expectations, and importantly, how they contribute to the value creation of your business. So you
Yeah.
translate into those problems and you see where are the trade-offs. And the last component is I would advise that once you do those first two steps, start on your sustainability journey as soon as possible. As a matter of fact, if you haven't started, you're already late, because
Mm-hmm.
it's going to take time and effort to build a sustainable organization. You'll have to rethink the identity of the organization, its stakeholder base, its processes, and its structures. The sooner you get to it, the better. Never go with a big box ticking approach. Never go in with an intention to cheat via greenwashing, and do not think that sustainability is going to you can do sustainability piecemeal. It has to be an integrated, holistic approach that encompasses each and every person in the organization, each and every person in the stakeholder set of the organization.
Yeah, because sustainability is a long way, a long-term view activism. It's not about that we are focused for short-term results. It's like
It's a marathon, is not a sprint. Exactly.
exactly, yes. And the last one question is more personal,
Yeah.
Yanis. I would like to ask you, can you tell us how you implement the principles of sustainability into your personal life?
Yeah, that's a great question, Barry. Thank you for asking it. I do my best. Let me start with one thing that I'm very proud. I actually plant one tree every day.
Oh, wow.
And how do I do
Amazing.
that? And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it. There's an app called Tree App. It was set up by LBS alumni, and I'm actually advising them. It's a startup. It's now currently available in UK and Ireland, but I hope they're going to expand in other countries. So the idea is that this app introduces you, it has a marketing component to it. Let's say I go on the app, right? And I watch 3 screens of a brand, short screens, like a couple of seconds every screen. And when I do that, then the brand pays this company to plant a tree. So Tree App is basically selling advertising space, but they do the following. First of all, they vouch and they choose tree planting initiatives in countries that actually need and have a purpose and care about the diversity of trees that they put together and so on. So every day you see, I mean, I think up to now have planted over 270 trees through this app. Right?
Amazing.
And you see
Congratulations.
how much carbon you offset for the week, for the month, for the year, and so
Mhm.
on. You can also fund trees. If you can plant one a day, but if you want to pay, you can fund more trees. Now, the other fantastic thing about this app is that they choose the brands to be fully consistent with the sustainability message. So these are sustainable brands, whether we talk about sunglasses or home equipment or cleaning, all the brands have been selected because of their genuine commitment to sustainability. So that's the one thing I do every day, and I'm very proud that I'm able to actually plant a tree. And there's so many projects from Kenya to Brazil and so on. And when you go to each of these, you can choose where to plant the tree, and you can see real-time pictures of how the land looked before and after the plantation. It's a fantastic app and great idea. Now, beyond that, I think in my personal life, I'll give you a couple of examples. I don't have a car. I don't drive. I always walk or take a bicycle, and I don't even own a bicycle. I use the public bicycles. And when you have to, I mean, pre-COVID, I was always taking public transportation. My one sin is that I used to travel a lot by airplanes because I was teaching, but I did my best to limit to offset my carbon emissions. The other personal thing pertains to I'm very conscious in terms of my daily activities, as in water usage, electricity usage, using appliances, and so on. And one thing that I try to eliminate and actually take out of my day life is food waste, because I think we waste tons of food. And the way that I did that is actually I signed up for a meal plan. It's a company that actually uses local products, green products, and delivers you 3 meals a day. So I don't need to buy things to cook and end up wasting 20 or 30% of it because I bought too much, for instance, right? So those are some of the ways that I try. And then, of course, through my work and the limited influence that I might have through, working with students, working with companies and so on, but that's more on the work side rather than the personal side. So those are some of the things that I try to do to the best of my ability.
Thank you, Ioannis. It's great inspiration for every person, because I think that we can do more. And I like your tips for everyone. So thank you so much. I wrote it down, this tree app, and we'll definitely check it out. So thank you so much. So, dear Ioannis, it's my pleasure to talk to you. It was my pleasure to talk to you. And I'm happy indeed that people like you strive to spread sustainable practices within the business world. You do an amazing job. And I hope that we will be able to cooperate even further in order to help companies transition to sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very engaging discussion. We covered so much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to at least share some of my views and some of my research in these very important topics. I think that we are all in this together. Nobody's an extra. Each and every one of us has a very important role to play, from our consumption patterns to the way that we vote, to the way we speak and influence others. So I do also look forward to working with you and SmartHead and really pushing the agenda forward, because we need to. It's urgent.
Yeah, it's about the cooperation, about the synergy effect we can create together.
Absolutely.
Faster. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.